We are looking at Parshas Naso. Parshas Naso is dominated by a few extended subjects. One is the Nazir, one is the Sota, actually first the Sota, then the Nazir. Then towards the end of the Sedra, there's an extended narrative, repetitive narrative of the process of the inauguration and the offerings of the 12 Nesiim at the time of the inauguration of the Mishkan. There is a further short parsha, very well known, and as we'll see, very beloved topic as well, and that is Birchas Kohanim. So I want to share with you initially a thought regarding this sota, and then we'll look more closely at the Birchas Kohanim because haTurim has a few insights to share with us in that connection. So let's take a look first at Perikei Pasuk Yud Zayin, that is found on page 754, if you're with me in the Art Scroll Chumash, the stone Chumash, and there we read about the process of the trial by water of the sota. So the Torah there says that the Kohen v'lakach Kohen mayim kedoshim b'kli chares. The Kohen takes consecrated water from the kior and he places it into an earthenware vessel, cup. Umin ha'afar asher yeh b'karka hamishkan, and then he takes some soil, some dust, or some of the earth from the floor of the Mishkan. Of course, later on that would be the Beis Hamikdash, but at the time that this instruction is given, it was the Mishkan in the wilderness, and it remained the Mishkan actually for a long time in Shiloh and elsewhere, but ultimately it would be in the Beis Hamikdash as well. He takes some earth from that space. And it says, he places it within the water. And then, of course, he also takes some parchment upon which words of the Torah have been written, and those words are then dissolved within the water. So the Baal HaTurim says, just find my place here. The Baal HaTurim says that according to the Yerushalmi, Lama Maim va'afar uksav. Why water and earth and texts, words of the Torah? So he says that this is intended to evoke in her, in the sota, the woman suspected of adultery, the solemn or the somber associations that are found in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Mayim mimakom shabas, the water, it should remind her from where she derives. Now, possibly this is a reference to what it says in the Mishnah, mitipas rucha, from a fetid or putrid drop, which is probably a reference to the semen from which the embryo is with which the egg is fertilized. But the origins, a person's origins in that sense are, let's say, not glorious or grand, fairly I guess, sordid, one could say. There may be a reference as well, however, to the placenta. That's also the mayim. The fetus is surrounded in a type of fluid. And so, again, that is the origins of every person. Every person derives from those humble and unassuming origins. So that's the mayim. The afar is where a person is going. After 120 years, sometimes sooner, a person returns to the earth. L'makom sheholech, the place to where she is destined to arrive. And ksav, the text, in this case is words of the Torah, but it alludes to the din v'cheshbon, to the reckoning, to the sentence that the court will hand down, which is a written sentence. So obviously in the heavenly tribunal, heavenly court, they don't have the need for writing on parchment, but it is intended to evoke that. So the Baal HaTurim finds in the process by which the sota is tried, these associations, again deriving probably from the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, the idea that a person should bear in mind in order to stay far from sin, from where he derives to where he is going and before whom he will ultimately be called upon to deliver a judgment, or rather will be called to judgment. Din v'cheshbon. So that's the first comment I wanted to mention, and actually that was in our little title of today's shir for those who took note of that. Um, I'd like to now turn to the parsha of the Birchas Kohanim, which is appended to or follows immediately from the parsha of the Nazir. There's a well-known comment of Rashi that the uh, parsha of the Nazir, the Nazarite, follows that of the Sota, because a person who observes or contemplates even the fate of the Sota will be motivated to swear off wine, because wine and drunken behavior, or the experience of drunkenness, uh, leads to a breakdown of inhibitions, and the experience of the sota, or the one suspected of adultery, is associated with lack of discipline, lack of inhibition, and therefore, as a corrective, a person who sees that will take the vow of the Nazir. Now, the vow of the Nazir actually was not a permanent state. It's only in rare cases, although it's discussed in the Talmud quite a lot. But the default position of the Nazir is only 30 days. So it's more of a symbolic, temporary gesture. It's a statement of intent or caution, rather than a long-term state of self-denial. But what's interesting is that the parsha of the Nazir is now juxtaposed to the parsha of the Birchas Kohanim, in which the Torah says, "Daber al Aharon ve'el banav lemor kosevarachu, so shall you bless Bnei Israel amor lahem." So the first comment I want to share with you is that the Bal HaTurim observes the juxtaposition, and he says that the uh, actually, just before we get to that, I just want to share a thought about the Nazir as well. If you look in chapter 6, verse 21, so in the Stone Chumash, it means turning the pages a bit to page 762. This is at the end of the Parsha of the Nazir, where the Torah says, Zos Torah HaNazir. It's a kind of repetitive, almost verbose pasuk. Zos Toras HaNazir. This is the law of the Nazarite. Asher yidor karbanon Hashem al nizro milvad asher tasik yado. The offering that he has to bring, kefi nidro, in accordance with his vow, asher yidor, which he has vowed, ken yaseh al Toras Nizro. And the Torah again repeats the expression al Toras Nizro. So having begun that pasuk Zos Toras HaNazir, the Torah repeats the last words in the same verse al Toras Nizro, and it's not immediately obvious what is the significance of the additional words. So Bal HaTurim says that that pasuk, which reflects on the experience of the Nazir, begins Zos Toras HaNazir and says at the end Al Toras Nizro. So he says that it is in order to teach us that a person who drinks wine should not render halachic decisions. Mishishasa yayin al yoreh. And that is actually the halacha, that a person, a posek, or anyone who's halachically competent, should not render a halachic judgment if he has consumed wine. Now, technically, it's even a small amount of wine, unless there may be a distinction if he drinks the wine on an empty stomach or if he drinks it with a meal. There may be some distinctions, but the essential point is that if a person's cognition is compromised because of the wine, then he's not allowed to render a halachic decision. So the idea would be that the circumstance under which the Nazir may render a halachic decision is in conformity with the laws of his being a Nazir, meaning abstention from wine. Doesn't mean that in order to pass on a question, you have to abstain from wine as the Nazir. But the Nazir is one who has abstained from wine, and having abstained from wine, he can be confident, or let's say ready to render a halachic decision in accordance with his expertise without compunction, because he doesn't drink wine. I heard from Rabbi Zimmerman when he was still in Gateshead, that he says he has an issue on Purim. He can't really fulfill the mitzvah of Adelo Yada. I'm not saying that he would otherwise, necessarily seek to fulfill the mitzvah of drunkenness on Purim according to the exact extreme interpretation. But his point was that because he was the Rav in Gateshead, there are lots of other Rabbanim, but ultimately his position there is as the posek for the community. And a question may arise, whether it's an urgent question, could be a question that's time sensitive. And if all the other Rabbanim in Gateshead are also drunk, like let's say late in the afternoon or beyond Purim night, then who's going to be able to be competent and in a position to render halachic decisions? I think he said he was careful not to get properly drunk on Purim because he has a duty towards the community in that regard. In any case, that's a remez that the Baal HaTurim finds here about the word Toras Nizro that appears at the beginning and then at the end of this pasuk. In a similar way, carrying the same idea further, and he says in his same comment that also this pasuk that we've just considered now, pasuk Chaf Aleph, precedes immediately, we would say, is juxtaposed to the short parsha of the Birchas Kohanim. And he says that's also in order to indicate that a Kohen is not allowed to recite Birchas Kohanim if he's drunk. And actually, this is I think it's fairly well known. The Torah says clearly that a Kohen who is drunk is not allowed to enter the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash, or certainly not to do the Avodah. Perhaps he can go as a visitor, but he cannot enter to do the Avodah, as is well known. The Torah says in Parashas Shmini, and Birchas Kohanim is considered part of that. Birchas Kohanim is part of the avoda of a Kohen. It's the only avoda, I guess Pidyon Haben would be another example, that a Kohen still performs nowadays. I'm not sure if Pidyon Haben is exactly avoda, probably not, but the act of Birchas Kohanim, of bestowing the blessings of the Kohanim, that is a form of avoda, and a Kohen who is drunk is not allowed to be called duchen, is not allowed to recite the bracha. So Baal HaTurim says lomar, to say shisuye yain psulan leberchas kohanim shenikreis avoda. Berchas kohanim is part of avoda. You may know that the minhag in many places, it's widespread minhag, which the Mishnah Berurah attributes to Prague. Apparently that was a minhag in Prague specifically, but it has become very widespread minhag that the kohanim on Simchas Torah do not recite Birchas Kohanim at Musaf, but instead at Shachris. The minhag among Ashkenazim, as I'm sure you know, is we say Birchas Kohanim at Musaf on the festivals, and we do not have Birchas Kohanim at other times. But the exception is that on Simchas Torah, we don't want the Kohanim to wait until Musaf because we don't know for sure that they will be in a fit state for that, because once the genie is out of the bottle and the celebration has begun, Kiddush, etc., so we can't be sure the Kohanim, or I would put it slightly differently, a Kohen who wants to enjoy himself with a l'chaim to celebrate the Torah will be constrained from doing so because he wants to say Birchas Kohanim later. He needs to say the bracha of Birchas Kohanim, needs to fulfill that mitzvah, and therefore he's caught, and therefore, as a result, the solution is that he should do Birchas Kohanim, and that is common practice at Shachris instead of Musaf, specifically on Simchas Torah. Okay, but in any case, even in places where they have Birchas Kohanim every day, like in Israel or some Sephardim elsewhere as well, the same restriction applies, and he may not do so if he is inebriated from drinking wine. This is by way of introduction. I mean, it's not introductory to our shiur, but it's what I wanted to tell you before we get to the Birchas Kohanim, where we have a few beautiful comments of Baal HaTurim that I would like to share with you. So the first phrase of the mitzvah of Birchas Kohanim is Daber al Aharon vel banav lemor ko sevarchu es bnei Israel. Speak to Aaron and his sons and tell them ko sevarchu es bnei Israel. So shall you bless the children of Israel. Amor lahem, say to them, and then we continue, Varechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, etc. Birchas Kohanim consists of those three psukim, the actual content of the blessing, but the mitzvah itself is introduced with the words Kosev Arachu. So Baal HaTurim has a few comments about Kosev Arachu. He says that whenever, well, this is my contextualization, very often when we find anything which is three in the Torah, the Mefarshim, especially the Darshanim, the Medrash, and other Mefarshim of a Midrashic inclination, will associate the three with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Even the three Regalim are associated with Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Any three that we find can often, maybe not in every instance, but can frequently be associated logically or midrashically with Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And so it is here as well. Kosevarachu, so said the haTurim lahaskir zechus, in order to evoke the merit, the Kohanim. Hashem says when you bless the Jewish people, do it with the word Kosevarachu. That is to say, ko is not part of the bracha, but the mitzvah in the Torah of Birkat Kohanim is introduced with the words Kosevarachu, so shall you bless. So it says about haTurim to invoke the merit of Avraham, about who it said, about whom it said, I don't know why he does it in the wrong order here. Anyway, Ko Yezarecha. Ko Yehiyeh Zarecha, so shall be your progeny. Hashem told Avraham, look up at the stars and count the stars if you can. Ko Yezarecha. So Avraham, we find Ko Yezarecha. In the case of Yitzchak, it says Va'ani v'hanar nilcha ad ko. Now, actually, Avraham was speaking, but he said, I and the Nar and the lad, that means Yitzchak. Nilcha ad ko, of course, that refers to the Akeres Yitzchak. The third pasuk he quotes is a bit curious because it's a pasuk in Yehoshua. It's not for me to say, but the Medrash quotes a different pasuk. The Medrash quotes a pasuk about Yaakov. So we have Avraham ko Yezarecha, we have Yitzchak ani vana nilcha ad ko, and in the case of Yaakov, we have Kog Somar Leves Yaakov. So shall you say to Beis Yaakov. Now that's not said about Yaakov, the man, the person. It was said, Hashem told Moshe, Ko Somar Leves Yaakov, so shall you say to the house of Jacob. Beis Yaakov, which of course Rashi there famously says it refers to the women. That's why the schools are called Beis Yaakov, and it refers at the simple level collectively to the Jewish people. But it does have the word Yaakov, meaning the Jewish people are referred to, as they very often are, by the name Yaakov, the house of Yaakov. So we have Ko in the case of Avraham, Ko Yezarecha. We have Ko in the case of Yitzchak, Ani v'ana nilcha ad ko, and we have Ko in the case of Yaakov, Ko Somar Leves Yaakov. So this is the Ko, and there are three psukim in Birchas Kohanim corresponding to the three instances of the word Ko regarding the three patriarchs, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He goes further, and he says the word Ko, 25, also is an allusion to Shema Yisrael, because in the pasuk Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, if you count the letters, you'll find there are 25 letters. So there are 25 letters in Shema. So again, we invoke the merit of the Shema. Moreover, and this is a really, it's not so much sophisticated, but painstaking reckoning, he says 25 times in the Chumash do we find the word bracha. Now we find the word bracha in different forms more than that, but the word bracha itself as a verb is found, or rather as a noun. Bracha as a noun is found 25 times, and in the footnotes in the Art Scroll they tell you where each of the 25 times the word bracha as a noun is found in the Chumash, and the word shalom is found also 25 times. The word shalom, peace, is found 25 times. So Birchas Kohanim consists of, it ends with the word shalom, and we have the word bracha 25 times in the Torah. We have shalom 25 times in the Torah. And he says, and that's why Birchas Kohanim begins with the letter Yud, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, and it ends with the letter Mem, V'yasem lecha Shalom. So the Yud and the Mem are 50, corresponding perfectly to the 25 times of the word Baruch and the 25 times of the word Shalom. And of course, the Birchas Kohanim begins with the word Yivarechecha and ends with the word V'yasim lecha Shalom. So we find the blessing and the peace are firstly contained within at the beginning and at the end, as if to say that envelops the Birchas Kohanim is um, presented or is complete because it begins with Yivarecha and ends with Shalom, and then we have the further remazim, the hints to the word ko sevarachu. The bracha is 25 times in the Torah. Shalom is 25 times in the Torah. I once heard from a particular Kohen. He's not a Rav, but he's a learned person. He's a Kohen of good standing, and on a particular occasion, he was performing a Pidyon Haben, and for certain reasons, which are not important right now, uh, uh, the Pidyon Haben was for my grandson, Ruth, and our grandson, and the I said to the Kohen something to the effect that he pronounced the Birchas Kohanim the way we have them right here. And then I asked him something, or I suggested, does he want to add anything, or does he have any further bracha? For certain reasons, I made that suggestion. So he said, I've always been taught that the Birchas Kohanim, succinct as they are, encompass all of the blessings that a person could want. Whatever bracha a person desires or seeks or aspires to realize are encompassed within the short words of Birchas Kohanim. And this is kind of hinted to in what we've seen already, in which Kosev. There's another very clever suggestion, which I quite like, that the word Kohen is Gematria 75. Chaf Hey, the Chaf Hey, and the Nun. Chaf Hey is 25, the Nun is 50. So the Kohen is Gematria 75, corresponding to the Ko, and Ko. Like we said in the three psukim, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we find the word Ko for each of them. The other imaginative interpretation, which I think is very clever, it's not in the haTurim, but I saw it brought in the notes, is that the letter Nun, the suffix nun at the end of a letter is sometimes used to indicate someone who engages in that behavior regularly. So, for example, the word rachaman comes from the word rachem. Rachem is to be merciful. Rachmanut. So one who is merciful, one who is characterized by the quality of mercy, is called Rachaman. Like we say, Rachaman hu yakim lanu is tukas daven alfas. We refer to Hashem as Harachaman. Someone who engages in Hamas is called a Chamsan. Someone who engages in Gezel is theft, is a Gazlan. It could be suggested that a Kohen is someone who engages in the Chafhei. The fact that he is the one who pronounces the bracha, the one who brings into effect the instruction found in the Torah, Kosevarachu, and that's what he does. So he's called a Kohen. It's like the letter Nun appended to the Chaf Hey. It's just derech drash, but I think it's very clever. One who fulfills the mitzvah of Ko is a Kohen, as if the Chaf Hey somehow encapsulates or exemplifies what the Kohen is. He's the one who fulfills the mitzvah of Kohen. The Baal HaTurim goes further, and he says that the three psukim in that comprise Birchas Kohanim allude to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, as we have seen. The 15 words, so there are three psukim, and there are 15 words. There's 60 letters, by the way. I don't know if he mentions the 60 letters. I saw that in Rabbeinu Bechaya. But he says there are three verses, three psukim, and 15 words. So the three psukim correspond to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The 15 words correspond to the years in which Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were all alive at the same time. That the 15 encapsulates or harnesses the merit or the sort of the power which has been bequeathed to the descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, because for 15 years their lives overlapped. That's why we say that Rashi indicates that when Avraham I'm sorry, that when Yaakov and Esav um, made that faithful transaction where Yaakov uh, provided Esav with food that he craved, and Esav sold to Yaakov his birthright. So according to Rashi, that was the Sudas Havra, that was the mourner's meal that Yaakov had prepared for Yitzchak, who was mourning the death of his father Avraham. And that's how we reckon that they were 15 years old at that time, because Abraham died when Yaakov and Esav were 15 years old. So Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, I suppose Esav as well, put Esav to the side. Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, their lives overlapped for 15 years. So that is the three psukim and the 15 words within the three psukim. Moreover, and this is maybe a bit more straightforward, the merit of the patriarchs is augmented by the merit of the 12 sons of Yaakov. So obviously we have Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, who are the three patriarchs, but we have also the next generation, who are the 12 sons of Yaakov. So the 12 sons of Yaakov, together with the three patriarchs, is 15. So this is the Schus Ha'avos Im Hashvatim, says the Baal HaTurim. Then we find a further remez to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He says in the word Yivarechecha, in the first pasuk Yivarechecha, so he says that B'chschus Avram Diksiv Babe, about whom it says Va'adonai Berachas Avraham Bakol. So Avraham was the beneficiary of all the blessings, Bakol. We won't dwell more deeply into that at the moment. Just the pasuk says Berachas Avraham Bakol. So the word Yivarechecha alludes to Avraham. Ya'er, the next pasuk, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. So he says that corresponds to Yitzchak. So Baal HaTurim seems to say, well, I'll first read you what he says and then we'll explain it. Keneged Yitzchak shera'a ba'akeda v'meis. Yitzchak glimpsed something at the time of the binding when he was nearly sacrificed and he died. And Hashem restored light to his eyes, that is to say, he brought him back to life. Now, this is well-known tradition that Yitzchak actually died at the Akedah and Hashem revivified him at that time. And there are a few hints to that in the text itself. I mean, the text itself makes clear that he came in within a slice of a dagger of his losing his life. That's for certain. According to Chazal, Yisrael actually left him and it was restored to him. There's also a tradition that he glimpsed at the Kiseh HaKavod, and as a result of that, he lost his eyesight. That's why it says later on, as he grew old, his eyesight was failing. We also have the notion that a person who loses his eyesight is considered as if he's no longer living. So possibly the Baal HaTurim is conflating the two midrashic traditions, and he says the word Ya'er, which is to enlighten, alludes to the fact that Yitzchak lost his life or lost his sight or both at the Akedah, and Hashem restored his life to him, probably restored his sight as well, although later on his eyesight did fail, as the Torah describes. So that, excuse me, Ya'er is a remez to Yitzchak. And he also says that Ya'er, if you reverse the letters, then it's Re'i, it's a remez to Olas Re'iyah, that Yitzchak was nearly an all-burnt sacrifice. Okay, those are the remazim to Yitzchak. There are a few others as well. I just wanted to get to Yaakov and close with one final idea. Yisa is the last pasuk. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, the last of the three psukim. So this is Keneged Yaakov, because it says Vayisa Yaakov raglav. Yaakov lifted up his legs, lifted up his feet, and he headed towards Haran. That was after the dream. Yaakov was worried, and rightly so. He was leaving the land of Israel. He was fleeing his brother Esav. He was facing an uncertain future, an unfamiliar land, going to the household of his creepy uncle Lavan. So Yaakov was very troubled, and he had that fateful prophetic dream, and Hashem gave him an assurance. And then it says, Vayisa Yaakov Raglav, Yaakov lifted up his feet. In other words, he had a spring in his step. So that's Yisa alludes to Yaakov, and it says about Yaakov, Vishavti Vishalom. Before he left, after the dream, it says, Vishavti Vishalom, may I return in peace. So there you have the third bracha, which ends with the word Shalom. The last thought I want to leave you with is not from the Baal HaTurim. Baal HaTurim lived in Germany, and probably the second half of his life, approximately, maybe a bit more than the second half, he lived in Spain. Whether he spoke Italian, I don't know. Italian and Spanish are quite closely related. I'm not aware that he makes this comment. I haven't seen it, but I did find this thought in the name of a contemporary of Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who lived in Italy, and the author of this thought was an Italian speaker. The pasuk here says, "Amor lahem," say to them, but the word "amor" is slightly unusual because it would have normally said "emor lahem." Amor with the kamatz, he says, is a remez to the Italian word amor, which means love. Amor lahem, the Kohanim are instructed to manifest, to demonstrate, and to feel within your heart love towards the Jewish people. And that is actually a requirement of the Kohanim to respond to pronounce the Birchas Kohen. And if you wonder if that is really the case, just consider the bracha that the Kohanim say. Asher kedishanu b'kedushaso shel Aharon v'tzivanu levarech es amo Yisrael be'ahava. There's a final word, be'ahava. The love is an important part of it. So that is hinted to in the word amor lahem. Say to them, love them. And because your love of the Jewish people, you will be a conduit for the bracha for Hashem, who wants to bestow goodness and beneficence upon Klal Yisrael. Thank you very much, and I wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos.